it's not like the governments don't still have the ability to go to the public, ask for permission. It's not like we're tying their hands. We're just saying, you can't use every trick in the book and excuse to exceed the rollback rate and just punish the crud out of your citizens.
Hello. Welcome again to the episode of the Let People Prosper show. My name is Dr. Vance Ginn. I hope you're having a prosperous day. Well, today I'm delighted to bring on another guest who knows a little bit about Texas, knows a little about policy and the healthcare system, property taxes, insurance, and a whole lot more. And it's none other than State Representative Dr. Oliverson. Sorry, Dr. Oliverson. Tom Oliverson, that is. And so, Dr. Oliverson, welcome to the Let People Prosper show.
Thank you, Vance. Sorry.
Yeah.
I did it too.
I love it. I love it.
In the air today.
I know.
It's good to be with you.
Yeah, it's good to have you on. It's good to get started. Some people probably listen to this in the morning, and we're waking them up. We're getting them going.
Like, wow, they can't even get names right here. This ought to be an interesting show.
All good. So let me go ahead and read your bio for the audience, though, because you got a great background, and then we're going to jump right into it.
Now you're going to put him back to sleep again.
Nah, try not to. All right, so Dr. Tom Oliverson represents Texas' 130th State House District in Northwest Harris County, including the communities of Tomball, Cypress, Waller, and Hockley. Speaker Phelan selected him to chair the Committee on House Insurance and serves on the Public Health and Healthcare Reform Committees. Additionally, Dr. Oliverson was selected as chair of the House Republican Caucus and recently ran for Speaker of the House this year. He is active with the National Council of Insurance Legislators in COIL, where he serves as the chairman of the Workers' Compensation Insurance Committee and as a member of the Executive Committee. In his professional career, Dr. Oliverson is a managing partner and practicing anesthesiologist in U.S. Anesthesia Partners, the largest anesthesia group in Texas with over 1,100 anesthesia providers. A grateful Christian, Dr. Oliverson has walked many hills and valleys with his Lord. He and his wife live in Cypress, where they raise their 3 children. So, with all that stuff going on, and a few laughs early on here too, Dr. Oliverson, why do you do what you do every day?
Well, Vance, I never thought I wanted to be a politician or run for office. I thought that was for people with loose morals and bad moral compasses. But, God really kind of put it on my heart that we need good people to serve in public office. We need people with moral integrity, with high ethical standards, people who want to serve rather than to be served. And that literally goes all the way back to Alexander Hamilton, by the way, who famously in a letter pointed out that there were people starting to creep into government that offended him because they seemed like they were there for themselves instead of to serve others. And he said, as an example, I give you Aaron Burr. And we all know how that turned out.
Yep.
So it's been a problem in American government for a long time. But what gets me up every morning is a desire to serve God by serving others and bringing, a God-centered worldview to public service and to just really try to serve others. So it's a ministry to me, I guess you could say. Yeah,
no, I love that, and I think with I believe God has calling for us, right? And my calling is to let people prosper. And that's kind of what's got me into what I'm doing today.
And you're good at it.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I think and you and I have known each other for a number of years now, and I told you a little bit about my story where I was a rock drummer in my late teenage years, and then I got in a bad car accident, and then that's what set me right. God said, you know what, wake up, Vance, it's time to get on the right side, and got a PhD in economics, worked in the White House, and did a lot of other things, but a big part of my learning and understanding of Texas and public policy and stuff is actually a lot of our conversations that we had, Dr. Oliverson, over the years. And so I appreciate those conversations. And, one of the big issues that I know you're interested in and I'm interested in is, property taxes and how to reduce them over time. And what makes you so fired up?
The goal is to eliminate them? Because I still believe in the goal. I know a lot of people poo-poo me or say I'm silly for feeling that way, but I think property taxes are a terrible way to fund government services. I understand government needs to be able to pay for things, but I think property taxes are terribly regressive and essentially punish the American dream.
Yep. Yeah, amen. And they're immoral. They're just a bad tax overall. I don't think if we would have created a tax system today, we would have put property taxes in it. I think back in the day, they seemed like an easier way to tax because it was based on your property. They didn't have sales taxes and other types of things that would be from a modern type of economy with computers and everything else. And we haven't left those arcane tax systems behind just yet. But I think we will soon, hopefully.
I hope so. I do think that, that it is it's a shame that you pay off your house but you never really own it because you still have to rent it from the government every year. That really frustrates me.
Yeah, same. Well, with your business and being a doctor, not just a state representative, but you are a doctor, anesthesiologist here. Why did you pick anesthesiology and what got you on that route first?
Well, that's a great question. Originally, I thought I wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon. But what drew me to anesthesia is as I got older, as a young man, I sort of got kind of crossways with myself and just sort of realized that my priorities were all screwed up. And I really studied the scriptures a lot and really started trying to figure out what God was calling me to do. It became really apparent to me that one of my biggest problems was that it was all about me, and the thing I liked about anesthesia is that it gives me a chance to practice the most important of all Christian virtues, and that's humility. As an anesthesiologist, you're really not the most important person in the room. You're kind of like a pilot. If you do a good job and everything's routine, nobody really knows who you are, remembers you, or anything like that. Even though your job's important, people remember the surgeon, right? But every once in a while, things go horribly wrong, and you have to land the plane on the Hudson in the operating room, which means somebody's trying to die on you, and you basically have to stand between that person and death. And so, there's that aspect of it. But most days, it's really an opportunity, I think, to practice humility, which is my favorite virtue. So, that's kind of what drew me to it. I will tell you that the other thing about it I liked is that there was a certain amount of procedural things because I did like using my hands and being hands-on. You weren't giving that all up for a calculator and a pen like some of my doctor colleagues that, take care of kidneys and things like that.
Sure.
But, I think the other thing is the anesthesiologist, you do really have a pretty good lifestyle as an anesthesiologist. And I think a lot of doctors are sort of married to their profession. It's really the thing that defines them. Getting back to the whole humility thing, I didn't really want to be defined by my job. I wanted to be defined by my family, by my faith, by my relationships. And so I think that it gives you a nice balance. I will tell you the one thing I didn't ever like, and I still don't like about anesthesia.
What's that?
Is the hours are really terrible from the standpoint that when you get to go home, it's great because you get to go home and you're done and nobody's going to typically call you later in the evening. But you got to get to work at just the absolute crack of dawn early. I mean, we are always the first doctors to arrive in the hospital. So my days usually begin between 4 and 4:30 in the morning. And if I'm at work any later than 6:30 in the morning, that's a late start for me. I'm usually taking care of my first patient before 6:30 in the morning. So I've never gotten used to that, by the way. When I first started doing anesthesia as a medical student, I was just like, oh my God, these guys get up early.
Right. That's rough. But it's necessary, right? Just like with other things going on, you need a good anesthesiologist in order to be there to make sure that they stay under as long as they need to. During that procedure is very important. And you have 3 kids as well, right?
I do. I have 3. Yeah. My oldest is a sophomore at Baylor this year.
Oh, nice. Okay, good. Yeah. My oldest is 10 now. And so I've got 3 and the youngest is 2. And man, they keep you on your toes. And speaking about God's calling for us in different directions, I mean, being a parent is probably one of my favorite things, if not the favorite, because of all the things you get to learn, teach them, and you see them kind of their feedback so much along the way. And as an economist, I'm studying people's behavior and their actions. And that's one way I can see the feedback going in. And I just love being a parent so much. And I know you do too. And I think it comes out also in how you legislate and who you are with your humility. All those things go together, don't you think?
I think they do. I think, so doctors, I think, actually make good lawmakers from the standpoint of we're trained to solve problems. That's what we do, right? We hear about, symptoms. We examine, we gather information, we figure out what the problem is, and then we prescribe a treatment plan. So we're usually pretty good listeners, and we're usually pretty good problem solvers. So I think, I don't know why there are so many lawyers in legislating. I guess maybe because they study the law or because they can actually practice law while they're on the House floor, which a number of my colleagues do. Yeah, it's hard to practice anesthesia on the House floor, although occasionally I have somebody walk up to my desk late in the evening and they say, he's been on the mic for such a long time. Don't you have something in your bag of tricks that you can make this stop? Make him stop. Put him to sleep.
Be done back there.
Let me get my bottle and my rag. Okay, you hold him down.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Yeah. Hey, well, something else I want to talk to you about before we get into some of the good policy stuff is, you did run for speaker this year. Recently, there was a vote by some of the Republicans who chose a different person to run against Speaker Dave Phelan now. And I don't want to dive too far into this, but I just wanted to give you an opportunity to give your perspective of why you ran and what you hope to get out of this upcoming legislative session.
Yeah. So Vance, I think the reason I ran is because it was pretty clear to me after the primaries that the public was not happy with the status quo, and particularly our Republican primary voters were demanding change. And what I saw from our current leadership was basically a failure to acknowledge that change was necessary at all. And I just said, look, you get that many of your colleagues defeated in the primary, that's kind of on you as the leader. And there was no accountability by the speaker for that. I think a lot of people would rightly point to impeachment as being, the thing that got the ball rolling, so to speak. It may not necessarily been the only issue that defeated a person, but there were a lot of my colleagues that wouldn't have had primary opponents if they hadn't voted to impeach Ken Paxton. So that is certainly the thing that got it going. And when I went back and thought about it, Vance, that was just such a colossal failure of leadership on Dave Phelan's part. That just should have never, ever, ever, ever happened. Again, going back to, sort of my default, my core mechanism, my values, I saw zero accountability for that. I saw no willingness to accept any responsibility for the fact that decisions were made that basically got members unelected, right? I don't know of any House member other than maybe Dave Phelan and his inner circle that thought it would be a good idea to try to impeach Ken Paxton. A lot of members voted for it because they trusted that, they were told it was a good thing to do, and so they trusted that. I know there were a lot of them that talked to me privately after the fact, and they said they were truly pissed that leadership basically got them into this mess, and then, quite frankly, just left them hanging out to dry in the primary, and got a lot of them defeated. So that was a big motivator for me. I was not happy with that. And I felt like we needed to do better. And what I learned along the way throughout this process is that it's not just about impeachment. It wasn't just about school choice. And quite frankly, it wasn't even just about Democrat chairs. It was about the fact that essentially we have concentrated so much power in the office of the speaker and taken so much power away from individual members that it's not really the people's house much anymore. It's almost like we have a second lieutenant governor, quite frankly, which, the lieutenant governor is a statewide elected official. Speaker is not. So I don't think that position was ever designed to have the concentration of power that it currently has. And so that was one of my main things was, hey, you know what? We need to give some of this power back. We need to make sure that individual House members have a stronger shake and a bigger role. I'm tired and sick, really sick and tired of seeing members hauled into the back hallway and yelled at because they're not, quote, going along with leadership or doing what they're told.
Yeah.
Or having their bills held hostage until they vote a certain way. I don't believe in that kind of, Gestapo style tactic stuff.
Yeah.
I think you win by persuasion. I think you win by having a better message. I think you win by convincing people that you're a good leader and that you really care at the end of the day about what's best for Texas, and you're trying to look out for them as individual members, and so they trust you. But you don't win by browbeating people or threatening them, which is unfortunately the pattern of behavior that we've gotten into over the last 18 months.
Yeah. It's unfortunate. I appreciate you kind of pushing this in this direction to where someone else will be a competitor to the speaker, because it's also difficult. I mean, you took a huge risk doing what you did at that time, given the inner workings.
You said, the Speaker Phelan made him chair of insurance in the bio. I don't know if you remember this, but the day I announced, he had a fundraiser that afternoon with all the Austin lobby crowd. And he very famously said in that fundraiser, there are applications at the door. I'm looking for a new chair of insurance.
Wow.
So fill out the application.
Wow. Yep. This is the inner workings of the Texas House, and it's interesting because you're right about the statewide elected being the lieutenant governor and the governor too, of course, but the speaker's not. I mean, he's elected in Beaumont, in Southeast Texas, and yet is running the show for everyone. And if you don't get on board, you get pushed out pretty quickly. And I mean, it hasn't, and your other point is well taken though too, Dr. Oliverson, is where it's not just Phelan. I mean, this has been multiple speakers that have concentrated power in just a select number of people for the entire House of a body of 150 people.
Yeah, it corrupts too, Vance. I mean, so I mean, if you think about it, I remember very clearly working with a lot of these folks, and look, I mean, a lot of them are my friends. We obviously don't see eye to eye on everything, especially right now, but I remember very clearly in 2017, 2018, at the end of the Joe Strauss era, these same members, including Speaker Phelan, say to me, we can never allow another situation where we have these cardinals. We called them cardinals, these armband type leadership types that lord their power over individual members and, threaten them or try to intimidate them and enforce the speaker's will upon the House. Right.
Yeah.
And they were so dead set again. Well, we'll never have that again, And then literally this last session, what do you think they're doing?
Yep.
They're taking members out in the back hallway and screaming at them. And it's just like you have literally become the thing you most despised, or at least you said you did 3 years ago. Yeah. Now you are the Cardinals.
Yeah. Yeah, it's unfortunate how that power, I think it goes back to your point earlier, though, too, is that humility is oftentimes that we become less humble in the situations that we're in. And not to say they're not good people or anything like that at all, but also these positions of power can kind of get to your head. Because you're right, a lot of these are my friends too, and I don't think that they're bad people. I think that the incentives are such in place such that it turns you into doing other things that you ordinarily wouldn't have done.
Yeah, and I think honestly, Vance, this is why one of the things I was pushing for is term limits on the speaker, because it's not just the speaker, but the people the speaker surrounds themselves with. They're king of the hill too, right? So at some point, if you're the chair of some all-powerful committee, your job from that day forward is basically to keep your thumb on everyone else and shove them down so that nobody challenges you while you're king of the hill, right?
Yeah.
Because it's all about preserving your power. It's not just the speaker's power, but if you're an important chairman, you don't want to lose that power either. So now you have to intimidate the other members in order to hang on to the power that you have, which is why I just think, it's probably a good idea to rotate that every now and again.
I think so too. Yeah, good points there. And anyway, I wish you nothing but luck as we go into the next session and see what happens for all of us, in Texas.
Well, we have a very, very good nominee in David Cook. He's going to do excellent as a speaker candidate. And I would be remiss if I didn't take at least a few seconds to just say to all your listeners that I'm 1,000% behind David. He's a good member, a good man. He's going to be a great leader for the House. He has that same sense of humility about him that I do. And he wants nothing more than just to serve this chamber for a certain period of time and then hand it over to someone else.
Got it. Yep. Well put, as usual. All right, let's get in some good policy stuff, stuff that we usually like to talk about a lot together and everything. And let's go ahead and start with property taxes. We talked about it a little bit earlier, but before we went on to record, one thing I was mentioning is that, I really appreciated you getting a lot of this started. I mean, I think we got to go back to either 2017 or 2019. I forgot exactly which one it was, but it's been a while now to where you and I were talking and you're like, man, I just want to eliminate property taxes. And I was like, me too. And I have been working on that a lot with Talmadge Heflin and some with Bill Peacock and others at the Tax Policy Foundation and some other members around. But one of the things that I think that we started to see, and I should say I was in favor of kind of the swap, right? Broadening the sales tax base, raising the sales tax rate a little bit and eliminated it all at one time, at least the SCOIM and O portion, which you could do that without raising the sales tax rate at all. But you still fall into this trap of you're raising a tax to lower a tax, right? And then the regressivity, it made it difficult to sell. I'll just put it that way. I still think economically, it makes a lot of sense. You get rid of one and you get the other one and the other ones can't come back. I get that. But this idea of not raising a tax and focusing on spending restraint, which the spending is the main problem, was, I think, a unique way to connect these two. And you really ran with it. I mean, you had a bill that session and each session thereafter, and really been pushing this and legislative testimony. You and I've been there. But what has been like your reaction when you talk to people and maybe why we haven't quite got it done just yet?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have made a lot of progress, Vance. I mean, if you remember when I first reached out to you in the summer of 2017. Yeah,
well, that's what it was.
Looking at the sales tax, and I was like, God, we're literally giving out billions of dollars in sales tax exemptions, and some of it's like stupid. Like ice for commercial fishing gets a sales tax exemption.
Right.
Okay. I think there were certain like haircuts or something. There was something where you paid a tax and on others you didn't. I mean, it was just all these really weird deals. But then we started talking about taking surplus revenue. And fortunately, we're very blessed to live in a state where, I would say 10 biennia or 9 biennia out of the last 20 years, we've had essentially a surplus instead of a deficit, right? So it stands to reason that we, instead of increasing spending every 2 years, we could take that money and just give it back. And lawmakers don't really like to do that too much because, they like to spend money on stuff. But it's like, last session you left here, you kind of had everything covered. You came back this time, there's a lot of more money. Do we really need to create a new program to spend more on?
Mm-hmm.
Right. No, probably not.
Probably not. No.
Yeah, no. I mean, so you and I started with 95% of surplus revenue.
Yes, that's right.
To be conservative, right? So you can still increase spending by 5%.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, oh. Don't tie my hands like that. I can't do that, So then we're like, okay, just take half, 50% of surplus revenue and dedicate it towards property tax relief every single session. And then, of course, the issue became, well, what do you do if you get to a point where, remember, we'd have these arguments about what do you get to do? You get to a point where it's like you have a downturn and suddenly you can't keep up with the compression that you've already provided. And that makes school districts nervous because then they're not going to get their money and all this kind of stuff. And we're like, but the rainy day fund comes in here somewhere, right?
Right.
So, I mean, I still think the goal is to keep chipping away at it until we get rid of it.
Yeah.
I mean, and I don't know that we ever eliminate it in like one fell swoop. Yeah. But I think every session we should be lowering property taxes to the maximum extent possible.
Yeah.
The only way to get there is to keep trying to get there, right?
Yeah. Amen. I agree. And we've looked at spending restraint using population growth plus inflation. There's other measures that are out there. And that's part of the statutory spending limit now. Huh?
We did pass that.
Yes, in
So,
2021.
Greg Bonin's bill from
Yep.
21, which
Yep.
was great.
So that's already there. So that's one of the pieces.
Yeah.
Now it's just a matter of using that surplus. And you're right. Some of the surplus was used in 2019 to buy down school M&O. Some of it was used in 2021, and then some of it was used in 2023. And so they've been chipping away. The problem is, well, a couple of things that I want to throw out there is a couple of problems is that some of the money has went towards homestead exemption increases compared to compression. So the more that you put money towards homestead increases, the last one was from $40,000 to $100,000. That helps out a certain group of people as winners, those with a homestead, which is about 60% of property owners. But there's 40% that don't have a homestead, that rent, that have a business, that have another property. They don't benefit from that. But the compression, which they call it compression, but for the audience, it's just reduction of the school property tax rate. That compression helps everyone, whether you're a homestead, a renter, or you own your own home. It helps all families in the process. And I think, to make sure that I'm kind to my friends who want to go down this direction of the homestead exemption, and they are my friends, I think it ends up being more about politics to me, Dr. Oliverson, than it is about policy and sound economics, to where we should be reducing the rate with the broadest base possible. Because the more that you narrow that tax base, the higher that rate has to otherwise be, which makes it longer for us to get to a situation where we could get it to zero over time. And so I'm hopeful that with what we've seen, because the property taxes only went down, maybe either down or a little flat. So the numbers are still coming out. I've been working with the comptroller's office now, but they did not go down by $12.7 billion or $18 billion, depending on how you want to look at it. At most, they might have went down $300 million in total property taxes. Although the school portion did go down like $4.2 billion, but all of the other property taxes went up. Cities, counties, special purpose districts, and even school debt, because the reforms in 2019 of SB2, there are a lot of loopholes. Yeah. And they get all that new revenue, right, to where that continues to ratchet up. And so I'm hopeful, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Dr. Oliverson, about what are some other types of reforms that we can help to close up what's happened in the past, while still making sure that we're following this direction over the last 3 sessions now. So we haven't put it into law, but basically it's been working of continuing to whittle down that school M&O property tax.
Yeah, I mean, you said a lot. I mean, I'll try to unpack a couple of things I heard you say. I mean, I think to your point, homestead exemption, that's not a bad idea from the standpoint of, I think one of the struggles that we have as lawmakers, lawmakers, I think, generally want to do what they think is going to please the public. Yeah. And I do think that if what you're trying to do is show a demonstrable decrease in the valuation of somebody's tax levy, right? Yeah. I do think that increasing the homestead exemption probably has a more immediate effect for somebody that has a homestead exemption. Then, the compression is one of those things where it's like a delayed gratification thing, right? So doctors are really good at that. We basically graduate from college and then go into even more debt for a minimum of 8 more years. Ultimately, the last few years of which we're working 100 plus hours a week and making about $1.05 an hour, considering how many hours we're putting in. Yeah. And all of our friends are out working and getting married and having families and, living it up and becoming, great golfers or whatever it is, Yeah. Yeah. That was the thing that always annoyed me when I was a resident is all my friends that had graduated from college and they're all, starting families and getting to go play golf with their business buddies weekly. And I'm just literally oh my goodness, I'm going to get home before 3:00 today. It looks like I might have time to take a nap. Right. Because I need it because I've been up for 3 days straight. Yeah. Right? Yeah. We're really good at delayed gratification. And so I think I see the value of compression over time that, you keep chipping away at it. And over time, the results are more long lasting. But I think the public kind of really wants to see more of an instant gratification. Yeah. And I think that the thing about the homestead exemption is that for those that have a homestead and get the exemption, increasing the value of that is a bang for your buck kind of investment that people are like, wow, whoa. I mean, we really raised the homestead exemption significantly this last time. And I'll tell you what, man, I certainly noticed it on my tax bill.
Yeah.
It was profound. Whereas normally we get somewhat of a tax break, but you'd have to kind of take it over time to see the effect that it was having if we were doing what we're doing. So, I think that's a big part of it. You mentioned the loopholes. I'll tell you what, the number one thing I'm laser focused on next session from a property tax standpoint is these stupid loopholes where you got like my absurd Harris County Commissioner's Court and my county judge who are like, oh, well, we had a hurricane, so we're just going to use the loophole and maximally inflate everybody's property taxes while we can. That's not what we put that in there for.
No.
So my thing is, I was putting a note out on social media about this last night. I was like, look, I'm going to file a bill to completely repeal that part of SB2 because that's not what we had in mind. And if you can't use it responsibly, if you're just going to abuse it, then we take it away.
Yeah.
And then I think the other thing on top of that, somebody pointed out is, hey, this business of being able to bank your, 3% or whatever it is and let it stack up and then just whammy people, that we shouldn't have done that either.
No.
So, I think we need to close a lot of these loopholes in SB2. Yeah. It's not like the governments don't still have the ability to go to the public,
right,
and ask for permission.
Yeah.
It's not like we're tying their hands. We're just saying, you can't use every trick in the book and excuse to exceed the rollback rate and just punish the crud out of your citizens.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Because the same time happens with those natural disasters is the citizens are getting hurt too. So you're asking them to pay more in taxes while they're already down, maybe looking for a house or where to stay and are different things. That's just a double whammy for them.
Yes.
And the other thing too is something to think about is, it only covers existing property. I think it should cover all property taxes. And so that way they don't get the additional kind of bonus, if you will, of the new property to bring in property taxes. Why should they get that additional amount? And ultimately it might go back to our earlier discussion about spending limits. Instead of just having property tax caps and everything is, why don't we have a spending limit at the state and local level that covers all the revenue that comes in for the local governments? And that way it's from sales tax, property tax, fines and fees, or whatever else. They have a limitation there, which would then be a backwards limitation for property taxes with the rollback rates and everything else. So that the spending limit version, I think, could also be a great path forward that Colorado has used. Even as it went from red to purple to blue, they've actually done a pretty good job on state and local spending compared to most other states because of their taxpayer bill of rights, which covers state and local spending instead of just one or the other.
Yeah, but I totally agree with that.
Maybe something else to check out. Anyway, I know there will be a lot of good work on, hopefully on the property tax side, and we're going to keep pushing to use surpluses to buy it down, hopefully to zero. My research still shows like 8 to 10 years we could still do that using surplus money. So it's not like it's too far off.
We didn't talk about this whole 313 reboot thing.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
all those kind of things. I don't know what your thoughts are on those, but I just hate those programs.
Me too.
I hate the picking of the winners and the losers and the stuff, and the idea that you could punish the crud out of your citizens, but you have to give a benefit to a business or they won't move here.
Yeah,
that just frustrates me so much.
Yeah,
not just as a state representative, but just as a property tax paying citizen.
Yeah,
I'm aggravated by that.
Yeah. And the research on this shows that it doesn't provide long-term jobs. It'll give you a little boom, a little bang for your buck early on, but then it kind of goes away after that. Right. And really you should have a tax environment that's conducive for everyone to be there, not just picking one winner over someone else. And it also kind of pits, small business owners in that community with others that are coming outside the community and having to pay a lower property tax. That doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't. I just don't like those programs. And I don't like the idea that to me, it just feels like bribery.
Yeah.
Like you have to bribe somebody to bring business here.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I also wanted to get your thoughts about insurance, and you've been working a lot on insurance over time, and not only on the committee, but then some of your other things on the National Council of Insurance Legislators. I was wondering about like the soaring interest rates on homes and autos. And what can do, and yes, a windstorm and other types of insurances that are out there. How can we start to break down what's happening more from almost like centralized by the NAIC and some others that are out there to make it more of a market-based system and bring it down to where the people can have more influence on what's going on compared to these larger organizations? I wanted to get your thoughts on that, Dr. Oliverson.
Well, okay. So two things. Let's unpack the second thing first, because that's a little easier to tackle. So the whole issue of the NAIC and those things, so the insurance industry, the insurance sector of our economy is the only sector of our economy where there's essentially not overarching federal legislation that regulates economic transactions in that sector, right? With very, very narrow exceptions like ERISA, the majority of, NFIP, the majority of insurance is regulated by the states independently. And Congress has actually affirmed that twice in federal law, in the McCarran-Ferguson Act in 1945, but also most recently in the Dodd-Frank Act. They reaffirmed the states' supremacy in terms of regulating their own market. So if you're a Jeffersonian guy and you like states' rights and you don't like strong federal government, you love the insurance sector because it's the one area of our economy where, if the bureaucrats and the liberals want to screw up the insurance market in California, and they have, big time. That doesn't affect us here in Texas. We have our own market here in Texas. And so that's a good thing.
Yeah.
You did touch on something else, though, which is that we do often in insurance, as in other sectors of government, we give a fair amount of authority to not only federal agencies and state agencies, but also in statute, a lot of times we will use some document promulgated by a non-government entity and say, like, for example, if you're trying to figure out how to pass a market conduct exam, which all insurance companies have to do, we just basically say in statute, you have to have rules for passing a market conduct exam alike, and using whatever NAIC says the market exam should look like, using their manual. Well, that's a huge problem in government, where basically state lawmakers and federal government does this too, basically gives authority away from the lawmakers, and it basically just says, we're going to regulate this, but we're not going to tell you how to regulate it, and we want you to just go to this unelected, appointed, member-only organization over here for guidance on how to do that. You'd be surprised at how many times AM Best as a company appears in the insurance code in Texas as basically part of the statute for how we evaluate things, right?
Yeah.
So we call that incorporation by reference. And I tell you, for those people that might be listening to this that were really excited about the Chevron decision, there definitely needs to be some Chevron type ripples in the water at the state level too, because we have some real problems. I think Brian Harrison has been pointing that out for some time and deserves a lot of credit for that, because he's right. We give away an enormous amount of power when we do that, and we should take it back. Let's talk about the market really quick.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. There is actually quite a few factors that are contributing to the expense that people are seeing right now insurance-wise. And the pressure is intense to manipulate, with the market, to try to manipulate the market to make the prices go down, right? But you and I, as market kind of people, we don't like it when government gets in there and starts artificially regulating. If you think about what insurance actually is, you're basically calculating a monetary value to risk. You're basically saying, a company is basically saying, okay, Vance, I'm going to sell you a policy and you're going to pay me a premium. And the calculation of that premium is based on the likelihood that your roof gets ripped off by a tornado in Round Rock.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that I'm going to charge you a certain amount. The risk is low, but if it happens, I'm going to make you whole. So you're basically getting somebody to monetize risk for you. You're getting protection from risk, and they're basically using a pretty exact scientific method called actuarial science to figure out exactly what the money value of that risk should be. And so when the free market is working well in insurance, those costs tend to go up and down based on what the risk is, and also what the cost of the repair is. So if you're seeing now, like a lot of people are, like, double-digit increases, sometimes as much as a doubling in premium in the last 2 years for insurance, there are factors that cause that. And these are going to not sound a whole lot like things government can do much about. The reality is they can't, right? So what makes your homeowner's premium go up? I'll tell you the top 4 or 5 things. Number one, inflation. I can't do anything about that. Neither can you.
Yeah.
And federal government's gone exactly the wrong direction on that. And now we're all paying the price.
Yeah.
Hopefully, if we get a smarter, better president in a few weeks, maybe we can kind of turn the corner on that. But that's driving a lot of the costs of insurance, because inflation affects the cost of labor. Inflation affects the cost of borrowing money, and inflation affects the cost of supplies necessary to make repairs. In addition to that, if you're talking about property casualty risk, you have weather events, right? You can't control the weather. We haven't invented the weather control machine yet. But if we had a weather control machine, that would be great, because then everybody's homeowners premiums would be really, really low.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of bad storms. And interestingly enough, they're not named storms, Vance. They're some of the worst hailstorms in the last 10 years have been in Central Texas, where you are.
Yeah.
Most costly, right? And so when you have a whole bunch of claims and very costly weather events, that tends to make premiums go up.
Yeah.
So there's that. There's the cost of reinsurance, which is the insurance for insurance, right? Which is like, I'm going to take this company's insurance risk pool and this company's insurance risk pool. They're doing business in the United States. They're doing business in Southeast Asia. I'm going to put them together, and I'm going to bank on the fact that there aren't going to be bad storms in Kansas at the same time there are bad storms in Thailand. And so that's how reinsurance works. And it basically makes insurance more affordable, because now the insurance company doesn't have to charge you as much, because they don't have to have all the cash on hand to pay the claims, because they've got insurance on the insurance.
Yeah.
But the cost of reinsurance has really gone up. So there's really only one thing that we've looked at that could potentially be a benefit in this environment. And that is, if you reduce the severity of the claim, you can lower the cost of repair. And if the cost of the repair is lower because the damage is less, then your cost of insurance is lower. So it's hard to do that in healthcare, but in property and casualty world, that has to do with building better.
I see.
And making sure that, and because here's the thing, like any insurance agent along the coast will tell you, if the roof gets ripped off of your house, your insurance claim just, quadrupled in cost. Just from the damage resulting from all the rain and wind and everything actually physically getting into your house. Yeah. Just building, and we can, by the way, just building your home up to a fortified IBHS fortified standard, which is a national standard, which most people don't do in Texas, by the way. If you did that, your roof won't get ripped off. And if you do have a windstorm, the cost of your claim just got cut by probably, 75%. So that actually then lowers the cost of your insurance because it lowers the cost of your claim. And if enough people in the same community make those same investments, then the community rating goes down. And so everybody's insurance drops, right? The problem is that you can't do it for free, right? So especially if you have a house and it wasn't built that way, you have to spend money to get it up to that standard. And so then the question becomes, is this something, and other states have looked at this, Vance, and like Alabama, North Carolina have very successful programs where they've taken some of the premium tax dollars that the department collects on property and casualty policies, and they basically give a one-time grant to help offset the cost of getting a roof fixed to a higher standard in the event of a claim. And what we've seen is that that's increased the value of the home and it's decreased the cost of the insurance. So a purist might say government really has no role here. This is a free market, and as long as there's competition in the market and as long as prices go up and down and they're not being artificially manipulated, then that's just market forces. But it's hard to explain that to somebody that just got their homeowner's policy canceled. Or the guy across the street that can no longer afford their insurance.
Yeah, because I know they've been going through the roof, if you will. I've seen them here in central Texas, where I'm at, near Austin, which, as you noted, there's been a lot of hailstorms and other things that are going on. So that certainly makes sense. And with the NAIC and so it's the National Association of Insurance Commissioners and everything else, are these issues that they're looking at as well? I mean, in order to find,
they are, and I'll tell you. I'm actually the president now. The information in the bio is a couple of years old, I guess, on that part. But I'm now the president of the National Council of Insurance Legislators, and so I work with the leadership of NAIC very closely. They're doing some big data calls nationwide right now where they're looking at costs of, claims and cost of policies and loss experience, and all the major carriers are participating, and they're trying to look for trends and various things that can be done. Most of it is all for good purposes. I would tell you that there are some in Congress at the federal level that are pretty much on the far left. They're looking at it exclusively from a climate change perspective. To find ammunition to support their cause. But most of us are just trying to figure out, who's doing it well, who's doing it badly, how do we help lower the cost of insurance if we can in our communities, and what does the future hold? Are we at a stuck point? Or are the prices going to come down again? Hopefully they will. So they're working on that. I will tell you, like I said earlier, Texas is way better off than California.
Yeah, that's always a good thing.
I know it sucks right now, and it's hard. It's hard to hear that if you're somebody that's struggling to find insurance coverage here in Texas. But to say, well, just be glad you don't live in California. I'm like, well, but I don't live in California. I live in Texas.
That's right. That's true. Yeah. So,
But it's a really good topic to talk about on your podcast, because the reality is that I know you're a free market guy. There are those out there who are advocating for some sort of a government risk pool to basically come alongside and artificially lower everybody's insurance rates far below what the market would dictate is an actuarially sound rate. Just like we have the TWIA policy, when people want to create a giant risk pool for insurance for the whole state. I'm not sure that's the answer any more than I like the idea of Medicare for all.
Right.
I mean, it certainly makes your costs less, but I don't think that's a good solution.
Yeah. Because there's always trade-off, right?
The size of government to do it.
No, there's still going to be trade-offs. Nothing is free. So there's going to be something else, whether it's paying for more government through our taxes, or maybe we don't get the same quality of insurance products that we otherwise would. We're going to pay for it in some capacity. As we're wrapping up here, and thank you for your time, Dr. Oliverson. I wanted to, as you mentioned it briefly here, but you also had a bill last session that basically stopped insurers from considering ESG criteria and setting their rates, which I think is a big step in the right direction. And I will say, when I first started hearing about ESG and what government was trying to do about pensions and everything, from the free market in me, as you know, I'm a free market economist, I was kind of like, well, I don't know if the government should be involved. But the more I've been looking into this and doing research and talking to Jason Isaac and others, is that the ESG stuff it's infiltrating our market economy. And whenever it's being done by government, meaning taxpayer money, the returns on those investments are not the same as they are in other types of assets like S&P 500 and other things. So they are manipulating us with our own money and hurting our economy at the same time. So this is not a market approach. If a banker wants to do it in the private sector and lose out on that money, that's one thing. But when it's the government and all the ways that taxpayer money is being used, this is certainly something that I believe should be stopped. And so I was so thankful that you were going along those lines of saying those criteria, say, you know what, we're not going to go down this environmental, social governance, progressive, big government nonsense. We're going to do something different with the insurance rates. And so I want to get some of your thoughts though on this as well.
Yeah, Vance, I think, there was a letter that came out in 23 from a group of very, very far left woke climate, groups, insurance groups, whatever, in Europe, basically chastising the American insurance industry for not being, quote, proactive in encouraging people to manage their climate risk. Which is exactly why we filed that bill, right? Was to prevent that whole issue from becoming an issue here in Texas. States are all over the place on this. And like I said, because we live in a marketplace, an insurance marketplace where you can have 50 different markets and they're all a little bit different depending on the needs of the state. Other states like Connecticut, they didn't end up passing this, but they had a bill that basically said an insurance company couldn't do business in their state unless they did do ESG for everybody and DEI, and which was just like, so states are going in different directions. The approach we took here in Texas was to prohibit it because, quite frankly, if it's not based on actuarial science, then it's an artificially manipulated rate, and it has no business in the state of Texas being offered, right? So I just want insurance companies calculating risk as they always have, using basic actuarial methods, and none of this woke climate funny business that you've seen creep into banking. We thought by basically passing this law in Texas that we could get this preempted so that it never became like it was in the banking sector. And I would say for the most part, we've been very successful. The caveat is that, again, this is a 50-state system of insurance regulation. So what we basically said was, hey, for your policies in force here in Texas, and if you're doing business in the state of Texas, you can't do any of this stuff, right? But we're not going to tell you how to do business in Massachusetts. They may have a different worldview because that's consistent with the way we regulate insurance. So that's the only limitation of what we did. But literally was the last bill that passed the Texas House last session.
Okay.
So that, the Democrats killed it on a foo-foo point of order. We have all of these parliamentary issues in the House that we're trying to work through, but I'll just tell you this one so your listeners understand how dumb this gets sometimes. So I filed a bill. It was a very simple bill. It just said you can't do ESG in insurance. And the insurance industry came to me and said, look, we understand, and you're the chairman, and you're probably going to pass your bill, but would you at least hear us out? Like, we don't want to do ESG per se, but you're talking about environmental factors for underwriting. What if a company just tries to limit its exposure in a certain market sector so that they don't have more than 10% of a market, by sector? So, they're sitting at 10% of the oil and gas. Is there, 10% of their business is oil and gas insurance, businesses, and another company approaches them that would put them to 15%. And they're like, look, it's just above our market cap for this. We want to be diversified. Can you make allowances for those kind of things? That's not really prohibiting doing business with oil and gas companies. But you may not want to take on another one. So I made all of these adjustments to the bill to try to take into account all the what ifs, right? Ended up with a much better bill that was much more contemplated, worked with the stakeholders, got something that everybody was like, okay, this is reasonable. Goes to the House floor. The Democrats call a point of order, and it was sustained because they said that the bill now had grown beyond what it originally was, which was a very simple bill that just said, no, you can't do it. Now it was, well, you can't really do it except the following things, would not be considered ESG. So you make the bill better, and then the bill gets killed on a point of order because now all of a sudden, it's become a bigger bill.
Wow.
And I mean, those are the kind of dumb, ludicrous, parliamentary, I would say parlor tricks that are preventing good policy work from being done in the Texas House.
Yeah.
So we ended up passing it, out of the Senate. Thank God for Senator Phil King, who worked his tail off to get the Senate version back over to me so we could pass. It was literally the last bill that passed the Texas House last session.
Wow. Well, man, we've went through a lot. There's still more questions that I have for you, but I know that you're a busy man, and we need to wrap this up, unfortunately, and maybe we'll do it again here soon.
Yeah, part two.
Okay, good. Well, Dr. Oliverson, I really appreciate you being on the program, and I God bless you and your family and the works that you're going to do this next legislative session and in the future to come. I really appreciate you.
Thank you, Vance. I appreciate it. It's good. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Yeah. Same here. For the audience, I hope you enjoyed our discussion. Go out and give us a 5-star rating or leave a comment, whatever it is that you do on the platform where you like to watch your podcast. And be sure to share it with your friends and family as they would like to understand this stuff as well. And I hope that God continues to bless you and let people prosper. Thank you.